Hi, this is Michael Orr. I'm the minister at the Saginaw Church of Christ. This is Riley Watkins. He's the youth minister at the Saginaw Church of Christ. And we're here to talk to you today about the lost art of church camp. Now, just as a little history and background, when I was in high school, my father, John Orr, who's the director of home mission, had a session for us as teenagers that focused a little bit differently on camps that I had been at before. Usually growing up going to church camp, you would have probably 2 or 3 Bible classes, usually on various and often sort of disjointed topics. And then you would have all of the things that you do at church at a regular camp that was just normal for everyday kids having fun. And so it was sort of like camp with church sprinkled on top. And even though people usually came out with that camp feel, that church camp feel, where they're all excited about Jesus for a week or two, it didn't really seem to stick with a lot of people. And I think that was church camp for many years. Along with that, there weren't a lot of rules back in the day when we were younger. It was just sort of do your thing, and there wasn't a lot of structure behind the way we did camp. People have always sort of enjoyed church camp, but at the same time, I don't know that anyone ever stopped and said, and I'm sure some people have, but we hadn't seen it or experienced it before. No one stopped and said, what if we focus camp in such a way that we're able to actually transform and change the people who go there, whether it's a teen session or 8 to 12-year-old session or an adult session. And so my dad, when he did his church camp when I was in high school, it was a very different feel. We had a lot of things that we had never experienced before, mainly the classes that we had, the intent on study, on evangelism, on growth, spiritual growth, on leadership. And when I graduated after a few years and meeting my wife, Loretta, and going to camp under my dad for about a year after that, Loretta and I decided, after we had spent a few years at Charles Goodnight's session in Peach Valley, Shiner, Texas, way out in South Texas there, we decided that we wanted to do something different. We came up with this idea called the leadership camp. And after growing in Charles Goodnight's 8 to 12-year-old session, and we had the teens, it sort of grew out of that. And he said, look, you gotta get your own camp because there's too many of you now. And so we started focusing directly on teenagers and working towards making them into leaders, telling them you can be a leader right now. It's not just a fun thing that you do when you go to church camp. This is about helping you to become a leader in the church, and one day, not just a leader in the youth group, but a deacon, an elder, preacher, a servant, a teacher, whatever. And so now it's been over 20 years that we've done either church camp or our first few classes that we had. And we've seen probably 30 or 40 at least go into ministry who have been through our camp, many baptisms, but mainly we've seen real transformation in the young people and lasting transformation that you just don't always see when you're just taking them through class on a daily basis. So what we're going to talk about today is why church camps don't always work and how to make church camps really effective in building leadership, building young people, being evangelistic, and serving the kingdom. So Riley, I'm going to let you take over and say a few things about why church camps can be effective and how they can be effective.
So for me, I was one of the very first kids that was in leadership camp class that Michael was mentioning that came out of the church camp at Peach Valley Christian camp from the 8 to 12 session. I think I was 12 or 13 when I first started going. That was in the year 2000. And
His voice is a little bit higher now,
right.
or
Yeah.
lower.
Lower, not higher,
Yeah.
hopefully. And anyways, and I didn't really grow up with a youth group. My early teen years, the church that I went to did not have a youth group. They had young people, but we didn't really do much together. And so church camp for me was my youth group in a lot of ways. And getting to experience that early on in life, truly I give all credit to it, forming me to wanting to do youth ministry. And I think it was because of this. And I think that there are times in life, especially the life of a teenager, when like the routine spiritual discipline that we go through each and every day, being with our home church every Wednesday and Sunday, sometimes that needs a kind of a sense of revival, a time of renewing. And I think this is why summer camps and retreats as well are very, very important. And I think it gives teenagers, and it specifically gave me an opportunity to hear the gospel in a new light and in a different setting that was rich with new ways to experience God. And because I didn't really get to do a lot of that growing up in my church. And so it gave me that ability to see that there was more than what I was being taught. And it gave me a place where I felt safe to express myself, to talk about struggles that I had, because I realized there's other teenagers that deal with the same stuff I deal with, and these adults here actually care about me. It gave me an opportunity for rest. I would come home exhausted, but I felt rested at the same time. And most importantly, I think what camp did for me is it kind of put in effect of what I like to call the constellation theory, where there is many, many stars made up into a constellation that makes that one star shine brighter. And it's kind of like it takes a village, theory to raise a kid. Is it wasn't just my mom and my dad or my preacher telling me things about the gospel. It was all these adults that had invested time in me at camp, telling me that I mattered to God and that I could be a leader. And it was important to me. And the thing I think that leadership camp does different and did different for me was they like plunged us into the deep end of the pool. Like, when you're learning how to swim and your dad just throws you in, it's like, go for it, son, you can do it. That's kind of what it was. There was no expectation of that. Since we were teenagers, we couldn't understand or couldn't do hard things. And so they plunged us in the deep end of the pool of the gospel and scripture and said, this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to learn this. You're going to be a leader. You can be a leader now. And I think that's why specifically for me, it was important. And I think that resonates with all teenagers, is that challenging them, showing them that you care for them is something that church camps have lost in a lot of ways. And not all of them are this way, but a lot of them focus on just the aspect of fun. And fun is not wrong by any means. It's very, very important to have fun and fellowship with one another. But the key point of planning a camp is looking at your purpose. So, Michael, would you say our purpose is and has been at leadership camp ever since we started?
Well, I think the primary purpose is to make disciples of Jesus Christ, to be able to lead them to follow Jesus. And I've always done this, and I know it's probably frustrated you on more than one occasion, but I always have to have something of Jesus or in Jesus. It always has Jesus in the title, which limits you somewhat to what, the journey of Jesus or just anything that says of Jesus in it.
Right.
And I think part of the reason I do that is that I want the camp to be focused on following Jesus Christ, becoming leaders like Jesus Christ. But there's also another purpose that's built into that. And it's always accomplished to me at the end of camp. We have this little deal that we do. We get in a big circle, and we didn't come up with this. I don't know who originally did, but I know one of our staff, Billy Schrader, had been doing this even before my dad's session, where we all got together and we had a string, and we tied this string. We had the string that we held all the way around the big circle where everybody from camp was. We would cut the string and we would have knots and tie it and everything else. And then we would all sort of be joined together. But the idea is that we were all sort of one one mind, one spirit, one body in Christ at that moment. And you would feel that at camp. You would feel like, we're all one group here. It's not, we're all sitting in our own pew and singing, which again, you can find unity in the church, but there's just something unique about being away for the week, away from the distractions of the world, away from cell phones. We do not allow cell phones at camp for a very specific reason. We want their full attention on Christ and on each other. And I was thinking about a passage in Philippians chapter 2 that sort of defines that second intention for our camp. And it says, therefore, verse 1, Philippians 2, if there's any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, fulfill my joy by being like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. And when you have kids who first come at camp during the week, if they haven't been before, they're nervous about being around kids they don't know. They don't know the staff a lot of times. They don't know what to expect. But by the end of camp, I've seen them year after year say, I love all of you, every one of you. I want to stay connected with all of you. I had the best time. I had the best feeling being here. I've drawn closer to God. We've seen young people, give their lives to Christ during camp. We've seen young people pledge to become ministers and servants and missionaries and all sorts of things. And a lot of it comes from getting to that point where we're so focused on the Lord during the week that we really do have one mind and one spirit, where we're all together as one. And the power of that, it doesn't come from us. It doesn't come from our camp. It comes from God. But the intentionality of that has to be completely and utterly tunnel vision focused to say, this is what we want to accomplish. We want to become disciples of Christ, and we want to be of one mind, of one spirit, of one body. And when we get to that point, incredible things can happen in a very short amount of time. So Riley, we've talked some about our overall purpose and goals. Talk a little bit about our classes and why we're very intentional about the way that we set up our classes at the leadership camp specifically.
So, I've been part of other camps before when I was a teenager. I've been part of camps as an adult, serving at them. And it seems like a lot of church camps and retreats, the number one thing that seems to be lacking sometimes, or seems to be an afterthought, is pretty much just the material that is given to be presented to the teenagers, when that should really be the time that you're spending the most on, is really intentionally planning out what you're teaching them, all pointing to a specific focus. Ours is always Jesus, always goes straight to the cross. But what we do that's a little bit different is we have 3 different kind of class settings during the day. We're the only camp that I know of that do 3 in a day, but they're very different in themselves, so kids don't feel like they're in 3 classes in a day, like they're being lectured to. Our first class of the day we do is called our discussion class. We don't have fancy names for things really. We just call it our discussion class. This is the one that focuses on the theme kind of that day, essentially. Our classes are, our discussion classes are split up by age specific, boys and girls combined, so that in that age specific class, they can talk about age specific issues. Now, teenagers all have pretty much very similar issues, but the older they are, maybe they can get into more deeper things. And the younger they are, they can talk about things in a different level for them to understand. So it's very important that when you split up these classes is to have a, age specific class at least once in that day. But our discussion class is kind of formed around the main scripture of the day. It gets really into like the meat of the word, and it talks about the problem of that day that we're trying to address and what that scripture is addressing in that problem. And it's usually about an hour long or so. And that's the very first thing that we do in the morning after we have breakfast is jump into that discussion class. And then after that, not directly following, but after that during the day, we call our focus groups, and our focus groups are kind of what you would see in like a big church setting that people would call small groups, where we break kids up, all different ages mixed together, different genders mixed together, so that you get all different kinds of opinions and viewpoints and everything on the matter. But pretty much what we do with focus groups is we take what we talked about in our discussion classes and we break it down for a practical, real world use. And we use kind of the theory called there, here. So taking what they learned there in discussion class and bringing it here, taking what they learned at camp and bringing it with them home. That's really what the idea of focus groups is supposed to do, is not just give them this lesson, say, here's what the Bible says, but here's what the Bible says, and this is why it matters to you, and this is how you can use it. And then the very last class we do in the day, we call our leadership class. And this is our one class where guys and girls are all split up. We do one big class of all girls of all ages, one big class of guys of all ages. And essentially each year we kind of pick a theme to where our leaders that are working with us at camp, our adult leadership staff, will share a reason why leadership matters, of how they came into leadership position, but they'll have different themes. And oftentimes this is our highest marked class because kids are seeing that there's a potential that there is something more for them in the kingdom of God than just being a teenager. But we take all of these classes and we make sure that each of those classes during the day are integrated with each other. The themes coexist together. We put a lot of time into planning our curriculum. Michael is a fantastic curriculum writer. That is not my forte. My forte is organizing. And we have it proofread multiple times. It's flush with scripture, and it all centralizes around a very central theme and verse for that week. And I've heard, more great things about our curriculum than I've heard from a lot of other campers at other camps. And just one small shameless plug for that is that stuff is available to be purchased. We've done such a good job at making camp be so successful and grow so quickly that we started what we call Total Church Camp. And all of our camp curriculum, or at least 3 years worth of it, is available for purchase at totalchurchcamp.org. And if you're interested in looking at that stuff, go check it out. You can kind of see the format of what we do and the quality of the work that we give our kids. But I think that if it wasn't for that quality of those classes and the effort that we put into making sure that it's all cohesive together, camp would just be any other camp. And that's not the only thing that makes our camp special. So Michael, if you could kind of speak to the importance of like how we've chosen our staff, and because I really think that our staff that is at camp is one of the biggest reasons why we've been successful and why kids have become leaders, and like where our staff have come from.
Okay, so to answer that question, I think we have to start all the way back to my dad's session, because a lot of the people who were leaders there influenced me to become a leader and become a minister. And so I've actually brought some of our staff I've actually drawn from that original staff several staff members through the years who have been instrumental in growing our camp. Some of the teachers, some of the leaders. We lost a dear friend of ours, Clarence, who was sort of the camp grandpa and did a lot of videography and just was a great encouragement to us. And the fact that he came over from the camp that I grew up in and stayed with us that whole time, there's a reason for that. We want mentorship because the church often lacks a serious idea of mentorship where the older teaches the younger. That's a very biblical concept. And for the older to teach the younger, you have to have intentionality and you have to have quality time, and not just Bible study, but doing things with people, having conversations that are in a comfortable, relaxing setting. It's hard to connect with teenagers when you're talking to them in their pew at church and to really connect with them. Sometimes you get that through mission trips and other things, But camp is a perfect opportunity for older and younger to mix together. Now, what we did is Riley was part of my original class, and Brenna, his current wife, that they weren't even thinking about dating each other when they were in our class, but eventually they fell in love and got married. And we've seen a lot of that happen in our camps, where young people find their mate at camp, and that's a good thing because they're godly Christian people whom they know and they trust.
There's like a dozen at least that have gotten
At
married
least.
in the first camp.
So you're welcome, families who have come from leadership camp. But what we did is that we wanted to use for our staff former campers who had already had the training and the teaching and the encouragement that they needed in order to be successful staff members. And so from a young adulthood, and we understand young adults, they make mistakes like anybody, but they're still kind of figuring out who they are. So what we do is we have a sort of mentoring program, a CIT program for our graduates, counselor in training. And we teach them about how to counsel, campers, how to teach, and they're involved in that process. It's a 2-year program. The first year is I do sort of training with them and maybe another staff member, and they try out every position, whether it's cleaning the kitchen, it's working with the campers, it's teaching. We want them to try everything to see what's a good fit for them. And then the second year, it's more practical stuff where they're learning under someone, the head counselor, one of the teachers. And so we really believe in mentoring, and just 1 year, and I think we were at Gulf Coast at the time. I remember it was me and Vern and Andrew, and I think maybe Barry, and it was 4 spiritual generations of leadership camp. Vern Burrow is an elder at the Needville Church of Christ, and he taught me when we were in Sweeney and I was a camper. And then Andrew Friedel is my brother-in-law, and he came to camp, and he was Jeanette, my little sister's boyfriend when I first met him. And I just kind of looked at him like, we're going to see how this goes. But he ended up becoming a Christian. He was married. Since then, he's become an outstanding minister and preaches now and is very successful at it. And then Barry Chenault was another camper who Andrew had sort of taught him and encouraged him and trained him. And Barry became a youth minister and has been a successful youth minister for many years. And
there's even some underneath him that are now in school to be ministers and are also youth ministers.
Absolutely. And so that's what we want. And they're not, the age difference isn't that big.
Right.
And that's the secret. When you have someone who's just a few years older than you, and they see you leading and in school for ministry and on fire for God, they're going to do the same thing. And then they see that person's mentor still there at camp, teaching and preaching and serving. And you want that continuous cycle of mentoring and leadership and growth. That's what the leadership camp really tries to accomplish, is we want to make leaders to put them back in the churches. Because if you depend on Christian colleges for that, if you depend on preaching schools for that, you're starting too late. You need to start when they're teenagers. You need to start when they're in their formative years, because by the time they're 18, they've already sort of decided who they're going to be. Yeah. And so if you get them before they graduate, you can instill in them, you can teach them how to study the gospel with someone. You can teach them how to study the Bible and be able to know what the Bible teaches. And we've had classes on that before, and we rotate those ideas around every couple of years. You can teach them how to be involved in the church. You can teach them how to get other people involved in the church. All of those things are essential for teaching and encouraging teens. And it's not happening in churches a lot of times. It does sometimes, it does to some degree, but it's amazing how much you can teach
in 1 week if you're focused on that particular thing.
Right. And that's one thing that we're trying to do better that we don't always see our churches doing good is that cellular growth of what it's supposed to look like in churches, of teaching others and they teach others and they teach others. And for me, when I saw that there was people who were close to being my peers in age, leading a camp, beginning to teach a camp, I desired that. I wanted that. Now, we're not saying that every kid that comes through our camp every summer in our retreats ends up being a leader or being in ministry or anything like that. There's always some of those that it doesn't reach, but that's just natural. But we think that our success rate and just the fruit that we have seen from church camp, and specifically the leadership camp, has been abundant. And we think it's a lot of these things are the key factors, kind of hiring within with our staff and bringing in the people who actually care about camp, not just anybody who wants to be there. Now, there's been times where we've had to get people at camp just so we can have, extra help. But we really try to implement with the CIT program that Michael was talking about, finding somebody's spiritual gift, because we believe that everybody's gifted spiritually in different ways. And some people are great teachers, but they're not going to be great counselors. They can sit and talk to a group of kids about God really well, but they're the one-on-one dealing with kids, issues of anxiety or whatever they're going through. They may not be able to be good at that. And so we try to give them that 2 years of training, let them shadow somebody different every day to see really what they think they are gifted at and what area of camp they fit in at the best, instead of just throwing them in, so that we're intentionally training them. And that's, I think, where it comes down to us being very successful, is every single thing that we do at camp. I mean, even down to our scheduling that we make, we do it with intention, like true intention. We don't just willy-nilly, oh, let's do this. Like, everything has an intention to make that week of camp, make better leaders, give kids a better experience, and hope that they can go home and take home to their congregations what they learned while they were at camp. Because we don't only just care about our camp, we care about what they're going to do when they go back to their home churches and how they're going to help lead their youth group. And we saw that a lot growing up in the church that I eventually became a part of when I was 16, the Needville Church of Christ. Is we didn't have a youth minister, but we took kind of what we had at camp and we just made our own youth group. We led ourselves, and it was one of the best youth groups I've ever been a part of. And I think a lot of that was due to what we learned at camp and how to just be leaders ourselves and do things ourselves and have Bible studies ourselves. We didn't rely on it for other people, because camp taught us that, we have to do hard things as teenagers, and we're expected to do more than just, make our beds and do our homework. And we're told to be leaders by God.
And Riley, I was going to talk a little bit about it, and I wanted to pitch this over to you afterwards, but you mentioned that we try to do things with intentionality. I think we also try to make everything the highest quality that we can. And there used to be for many years this idea that camp should be grueling and sad, that, the food and everything else is sort of halfway done because, oh, well, they're kids, they'll be fine. They don't need anything special. Let's just do frozen stuff all week. Let's just, kind of give them whatever. And one of the things that we wanted to do from the beginning, and I learned this from my dad's session, and I added to it because my wife Loretta is an excellent cook and really influences a lot, is that we try to make everything special at camp. For instance, we try as much as we can to do homemade stuff. We try to, peel potatoes, to cook food that the kids don't normally get on a daily basis, things that are just to them, just like we have chicken strip night where we cook hundreds of chicken strips. This isn't store-bought chicken strips. This is from scratch chicken strips. We make mashed potatoes from scratch. We make green beans and other things from scratch. Now, there are some things that we have to sort of use something canned, but all of it's homemade style food. And we do our theme nights for our food, whether it's Mexican food or country or whatever. We try to, and at the last night, Friday, we have a special night where, Fancy Friday, and the entire mess hall is transformed. We have a theme every night for our mess hall where it's changed, and we have a great decorator that makes these amazing themes. We've had Star Wars, we've had Willy Wonka, you can just anything you can imagine we've done. And we base the food on the theme. And the last night, it's like a fancy meal. And sometimes it's high restaurant quality food. I mean, we're talking about sit down dinner, steak, all sorts of stuff that you would only see in a restaurant usually. And the staff actually serves the kids, and they all sit at a table together. And it's amazing. You can go on our website to kind of look at some of the pictures, but it's amazing how the mess hall transforms. But we do all of this effort every single night because we want those kids to go away thinking, that was the best food I've ever had. That was the best time I've ever had, because we want the quality of everything to be at the highest level, not just the Bible classes. Because this idea that, well, they're there to study the Bible, they're not there to have fun. That's not good. And on the opposite, well, they're there to have fun, and then they can study the Bible some too. It has to be everything, because the more that you put into a camp, the more that it's going to be special for the kids, and the more they're going to want to be a part of it for years to come. And I think churches in general, we have this idea that let's do the cheapest thing possible. I think that's a mistake. And the truth is, we run on a pretty tight budget. We work very hard to keep our budget low, but we have the highest quality food and products. We even have salads for the staff or for others if they need an alternative to sloppy joes or whatever it is we're going to have for lunch. We try to cater to the needs of the teens, because for a lot of these kids, they don't get that at home. They don't get those. I mean, we have kids from all over the place, and sometimes they're kids whose home life isn't the best, and coming here and being treated so well, they know that you care about them. They know that you put so much effort into what you're doing. That means a lot to them. That is a ministry in and of itself. And so make sure, if you're going to have a camp, to make the food of the highest quality, make the fun of the highest quality, make the Bible classes of the highest quality, make worship of the highest quality. Choose facilities that are going to be good. Don't make them rough it so much that they're being miserable all week and they can't focus on the Lord. You don't need to put them up into the Ritz-Carlton, but at the same time, when you have a camp, make sure it's clean, make sure it's comfortable enough for them to not to be distracted by it. That kids can put up with a lot, but the more that they can focus on the important things, the better. So quality matters.
Yeah.
And that's with anything, right? But especially when we have a youth camp, quality matters. If you make shortcuts, it's going to be felt by the camp, and it's not going to make the camp experience as good.
It's very true. I mean, teenagers don't think any different than we do when it comes to our comfort levels. If say you paid an all-inclusive trip to go on a vacation, but the food wasn't good or the bed wasn't good, we try to make sure that they're as comfortable as they can be. And Michael's not lying about the food. I'm telling you, I have been to multiple church camps, and I'm not just saying this because I'm biased, but we have the best food there is. And don't go cheap on the food. I think we budget like $55 a person for the week for food, which is a high budget, buy quality stuff, hire good cooks, and don't be afraid to pay your cooks, because they have one of the hardest jobs there. Make sure that everything you're doing is intentionally to help service these kids, because you're providing them a service in a way. They're paying to be there, and so if you have the mindset of, oh, they can just have hot dogs every day, that's not a good mindset. You want every aspect of camp to just be absolutely amazing for these kids. And for me, growing up to camp, the food was always really good for us like that, because ever since we started, it's been that way. But our conditions that we stayed in weren't always the best. I think our dorms we stayed in at the first camp we were part of when I was a teenager were old World War II Army barracks. that were basically just hot boxes, and they were tough, but we've gotten better over the years. And compared to a lot of other big box church camps here in Texas, we're still relatively cheap. And so budgeting is important. Make sure that you can break down everything to a very specific cost, and try to keep it as cheap as you can, with at the same time having really good quality. Because here's the thing, you don't always think about the teenagers, but the one you really don't think about is your staff members. If you don't give your staff members a good and pleasant time and experience at church camp, they're not going to want to come back and keep serving. Because for myself, I'm a minister, so I'm not taking time off work to go to camp. It is my work. But there's other people that are sacrificing their vacation in order to be there. And so make sure and treat your staff well too. Make sure that they have time to rest in the day, and your kids too. Make sure that they're getting fed well, and make sure that their cup is being filled too spiritually, because it's draining teaching for an entire week at camp. You go home and you're like, the kids feel good, but man, I'm drained because I've just been pouring out the whole time. So make sure that you're pouring into your staff as well, in a way, give them a special night to be treated well. There's lots of things that go into camp to make it successful, but you cannot have camp without your staff. It's absolutely impossible. And you can't have camp without your kids. So make sure that you're treating them well too. So you might think that's silly for us to focus on food, but food is incredibly important at camp, because teenagers eat a lot, and food's very important to them, and it's important to us as well. So it should be to you. If you find it important, they find it important too.
And so we want a balance of fun and spiritual growth. We want them to have a blast, but we also want them to grow spiritually. And some camps focus only on fun, only on competition, and make everything a competition. We don't have any competition really in our camp.
Nothing serious.
Nothing serious. And we do that purposefully because we want it to be about growing together. And competition it's not very Christian, not in terms of being able to grow kids spiritually. You want one message when you have camp, and that is that we want to serve Jesus Christ. We don't want competing messages, because kids, they already have natural messages that they get at school. They have messages they get from life. That's where I wanted to talk about why, I mentioned it earlier, why we don't allow cell phones. We have seen camps where kids are allowed to have cell phones, and some kids would rebel and not go. I remember one kid saying, well, if I can't bring my computer and my cell phone, I don't want to go. We're like, okay, well, we'll see you later. We're not going to, accommodate for that. And there's a big reason for that. That cell phone represents the world. That cell phone represents disconnection. And we will send kids home if they get caught with a cell phone. And the reason for that is that we do not want the outside world in that week of camp. Some kids, at the first day or so, they have a little bit of a withdrawal. But after that, they don't even miss it. And there's a reason, because when you're having fun, when you're focusing on the important things, when you're making friends, when you're growing in the Lord, those things, the things of the world melt away for a week. And that's when the heart is open to really proclaim the word. And so some of the things that make camp so unique, being able to sing under the stars. We live in Saginaw, Texas, right outside of Fort Worth. There are no stars in Fort Worth. You go out and you look at the sky and you see haze and maybe one or two stars. But you go out at night in the middle of, Texas, East Texas, West Texas, whatever, where there's no city for miles, and you just have stars everywhere. And we always sing under the stars, and that's some of the most favorite things for kids to do. And they don't have songbooks, and it's not anything really formal. We're just singing together in the Lord. And that connection with nature, and that connection with God, that connection with each other, it's medicine to the soul. It builds up spiritual faith and growth and love for the Lord. Every Christian needs that. And we don't get that when we're just going to church. When you're in a building every Sunday, you can have a wonderful worship experience. You can build one another up. You can serve and help one another. but it's nothing like singing under the stars. It's nothing like connecting with God when you're outdoors. And so there's something special about that connection. You disconnect from the world, you disconnect from sin, you disconnect from all of the distractions that the world offers. And then you can really teach young people something. Then their hearts are wide open to receive the gospel, to receive the word. You can train them, you can teach them, and then you can build on that after they leave camp. And you can build on that throughout the year. And we try to stay up with our campers, and we try to encourage them to really do some things that are going to help them grow when they're back at church. Because ultimately, camp's just 1 week for us, but it's a lifetime of serving the Lord. And we want to prepare them for a lifetime of serving the Lord.
Right.
That's the goal. So, Riley, we've talked a lot about the things that we do at camp, about the way that we do camp. What other things do we sort of want to tell people from the things that we've learned and the things that we've experienced? I know that organization has always been something you've been good at. We have a counselor's manual, a teacher's manual. You provide lots of illustrations and things and activities, icebreakers for the teachers when they teach classes. You have a lot of resources for them for that.
Right.
We have rules of behavior that are very specific. You cannot make it the Wild West. You have to have very specific rules because kids will bend them if they can. We have rules on PDA. We have rules on how the language they use, and rules are important. And so we go over the rules with the campers. Our staff goes over the rules. The head counselor and the counselors go over the rules at the beginning of camp. Talk about some of the specific details that really make things run smoothly in camp.
Right. So just spending a lot of time kind of knowing what your purpose is and knowing what you're wanting to accomplish is the very first step. And that really comes through when you plan and are able to write out, your camp guidelines and what you're wanting your counselors to accomplish and your teachers and your CITs and your focus group leaders and all that stuff. Have that stuff written out, make a nice manual. We've done that with our total church camp stuff. I mean, when you buy that and look at it, it has all that stuff in it and gives you kind of a good idea of where to start, but we train our staff, and that we think it's really important to train your staff. Don't just bring them on and think, oh, it's teenagers, they can figure it out, and give them training. And specifically here in the state of Texas, we have to give them training on like sexual abuse awareness and stuff like that. And, because those kind of things happen at camp. And so we want to train them of how to look out for those kind of things and be aware of those kind of things, but train your staff, invest time in them. So what we do is the day before camp starts, the Saturday before camp starts on that Sunday, we ask all of our staff to show up. We get to have a big fun day together, training, having fun, reading over the manual, eating good food, enjoying each other's company, getting settled into our cabins and our places we're staying. And it's important that we give them that time in order to fellowship with one another before the kids get there, so that their mindset is already organized and ready for when the kids get there. Because once the kids are there, it is just pure chaos from the start. And it's crazy and fast paced, and all of a sudden camp's over. And so you really want to invest time into your staff, not only during that day, but before too, calling them, talking to them about camp, asking them their opinion about stuff, getting them to help you, plan camp and come up with ideas for things, asking them to read over the curriculum and see if they think there needs to be changes made, showing that they have an investment into camp, and a part in planning camp is important. But having a camp that is organized is very, very important, because kids can see through a ruse really easily. You don't think they're that smart, but teenagers are smart, and they can see when something has not been planned well for them. And like I was saying earlier, if you notice something like that to you, kids are going to see it as well. And some people would take it offensive, saying, why didn't you plan better for me, knowing that I was going to be here? We're offering a service to them, show them that you care enough about them that you will plan and organize this and make it well for them. Now, I have the struggle of wanting to follow a schedule so tightly that like I can be a schedule jerk sometimes, but it's important to not be a schedule jerk and to not, tell this focus group, hey, you got to stop because we have games now. Like if they're really invested in their conversation, their discussion, let it go, so you also have to be flexible at the same time, yet organized. And it's kind of a fine balance, and that's where having a good team comes in. Me and Michael make a great director team because he's really great at writing the curriculum and a lot of the spiritual aspects and a lot of this, the whole creativity idea coming up with of camp that I'm not good at. Find somebody that complements you well when it comes to planning a camp, not somebody who thinks just like you, because then you're not going to get both sides of the coin. So it's really important to be organized, yet also be flexible in your planning and what you do. It's important to have a good amount of free time too for the kids, but not too much. It was like a Goldilocks zone there of free time, because you can work kids too hard, but you definitely want to give them time to rest and just hang out, because that fellowship that they have with one another is important.
Riley, how many times have we rewritten the schedule?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. I think we tweak it every year.
And that's the thing. We've never found the perfect schedule, and you never will, because as times change, kids change, their expectations change. Your staff changes, the way things go changes, where you are, your location changes. And so every year we take a look at the schedule. Every year we take a look at the staff and we ask, okay, do we need to make additions? Is the staff looking good? Do we have a theme already? We usually come up with our theme before the year, that current year is done. Sometimes I'll come up with a theme during camp. And the reason is you cannot plan enough for a week of church camp. It can be one of the most transformational weeks of your teenagers' lives in your youth group. It can be one of the most transformational weeks of the staff's lives if you do it correctly. And that I know we don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but I did want to say there are also camps for adults. My dad and I are doing an evangelism camp where they're the Great Commission camp starting this year, and adults need camp too. Riley is over a young adults retreat. Young adults need that fellowship as well, and it's run differently, but the same purpose: to be of one mind, to be of one spirit, to become disciples of Jesus Christ. We have a girls' retreat. We have a guys retreat. We have a leadership retreat. Retreats are run differently than camps, but a lot of times we use the same basic formula. It's kind of like a day of camp in a way, a full day of camp. And those kinds of camps and retreats, what they're doing is that they're asserting and adding to what we're doing at church throughout the year. It's like a shot in the arm. It's saying, let's train, let's teach, let's have intention on showing our young people, this is how you can be a leader. This is how you can be involved in the church. And there's nothing like camp for doing that. There's no way to artificially create that at church. There's no way to do that in a building.
No, it's because you're taking them away from it, and putting them in a different environment.
And so that's why it's necessary. And you look at even Jesus, he went under the wilderness, and when he taught, he didn't teach all the time at in the temple. He taught, or in the synagogue, he taught in the mountains. He taught by the river or the sea. He did his teaching in nature, because that's where people find God. That God is the closest. And that's when we can really connect. So that's kind of where we are. We welcome any of your questions. You can always go to the Leadership Camp website. You can go to our Facebook page. You can contact us at the Saginaw Church of Christ. We're more than willing to talk to you about how we do camp, about how we have mentored and trained teenagers, about how we put intentionality into things, resources that we might be able to share with you, our different retreats and other things. So we're really doing this mainly because we're very passionate about youth camps. We're very passionate about retreats. We're very passionate about helping the Lord's church to be evangelistic in their camps and activities.
Right.
If you miss the opportunity to change the lives of your teens or of anyone who attends these camps, you're missing something that you can't replace when they become adults. Don't miss it. Make the best of this time that you have with these young people. They will thank you for it, and the Lord will bless you for it. So any closing words, Riley?
Yeah, so if you do want to learn more about our camp that we run, the website is theleadershipcamp.org. You can see kind of the different things that we do there, the different ministries that we do there. If you want to learn more about the retreats that we run, you can go to orfamilyministries.org. And that has all the different retreats and stuff that we run as well. We encourage you that if you're part of a church that has 1 or 2 lone teenagers and you don't have a youth group, send them to camp. And we don't care if it's ours, just send them to a camp. Ours takes place every year in July, and we know there's a lot of other great ones out there. And if you want to learn more about the curriculum that we've written that is specific for camp, it's kind of like what we call church camp in a box. Like if you want to start your own retreat with your group or start your own camp, you can go to totalchurchcamp.org. And all that stuff there is available to preview, to be looked at, because we want to be able to give you what we have found our camp to be successful. And we want you to be successful as well. And so that you can be successful in making leaders for your church now, instead of expecting the teenagers to be leaders later, because they have a full ability to do it now. So we hope you've enjoyed this class. And like I said, Michael said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Our contact information is on the Saginaw Church of Christ.org website. And feel free to ask us any questions if you want any more resources or anything of that nature.
Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you.